Hello, everyone. Back with episode 4 of our D'ART Shtajio vlog.
This is
Oh yeah, I'm Henry Thurlow. This is
Arthell Isom.
Japanese anime studio in Japan. Arthell and I have both been here for over 10 years, worked on a whole lot of anime. We're the anime insiders. And yeah, that's our quick intro. So last week we talked about, what is it? Like suggestions for kind
How
of
to get in the industry and what was required.
yeah. So we thought maybe we'd kind of continue with that, but give you more specifics, right? So last time it was more vague, just like we're going to be strict with making sure people's portfolios really look the way they need to, and then some general
Be a good
suggestions.
artist.
Yeah, be a good artist. But so what does that mean, right? I think some people want to know, like, well, what exactly do you do on anime? Like what kind of things, if these were in my portfolio, would anime studios or would D'ART Shtajio really like, right? Like if you guys want to apply to us, similarly to how when I first applied in Japan with just a portfolio of Western, stuff, I couldn't get in because not right away because they saw it and they were just like, "What is this? This is all Western thinking. This is Western animation." So, what kind of things do they want to see here? Where if they see that, they're like, oh, "Okay, well, now this is kind of the Japanese style of production. So, all right, that's good. Now I kind of want to have you on the project." So, in a rare move, because I ramble on and on and on. I'm going to kick it over to you first to talk about background art and everything you got to say.
All right. I'll try to ramble a little bit. I don't really have too much to say all the time. But so we're talking about background art, and this kind of what is required to be a background artist for at least Japanese animation. Of course, Western background art is a little bit different. So what we have here is just some of the books of my favorite artists, and also just actually I've worked on these films, so that's kind of why I brought out this book, and I brought my portfolio to show you. So I'll kind of start with that, just kind of like what kind of portfolio was required, at least when I started. Like actually now, so I'm dating myself, but because I have been in Japan now for, I guess this will be my 15th year, so for a really long time, and when I started working, we still painted on paper, which is the reason why I came to Japan, because I like the traditional technique. There are still studios here that do paint on paper. So because we still painted on paper, our portfolios were still analog. Now, I think most of you will have digital portfolios, and we'll kind of look at that as well. But for paper, we talked about just your ability to draw, right? And so all right, I'll just take something out here. But like for a background artist, your ability to draw like perspective, understand light and value, understand structure and objects is really, really important. Like this can't be overstated enough. And so this is an example of a drawing I did actually at the school that I went here. So I went to a art school here and in America. So this was before I even started working in the animation industry here. But this was just one of this was the level of drawing that I had at that time. Of course, now I draw way better. But, so I'm just drawing, it's just a train track, right? But at the same time, there's just a lot of information here. Of course, I guess this is about 2-point perspective. And I'm not going to get too much into detail about that. But there are few things I want you to pay attention to when you're drawing. Like, so you're just not out there just kind of like, okay, I drew a street here, or I drew this car. When you're drawing, like, I think Van Gogh said it, like, you have to decide how much detail you are going to put into something. Where is the detail not important? Where is it not needed, and where is it needed? And so even inside this drawing, like of course in the shadow areas, you don't really need to draw everything in the shadow, right? So that can kind of disappear. And the artists pay attention to that, like because that is that tells us focus. And that is something that's super important for background art. Like although now, because background art is digital and we use sometimes people use textures and things, it is important to be able to direct your eye, because background art shouldn't stand out. The character's supposed to stand out. So in this drawing, even though the environment and things here, we still look at the train, right? And that's because the lines are all pointing towards the train. And so I have a little bit of detail and everything here. My contrast is sharpest and strongest here, even though everything else is designed well and drawn well. But you see that the sky and the buildings and things like that just kind of fade out. And that's important when you're painting a background or drawing a background, and then also painting it, deciding how much detail you're going to place in each area so that it directs our eyes to look at what we're supposed to look at, which is always going to be the character in the scene. And but just with, at least with, this is pencil and paper, but you're drawing, you should at least be able, well, you don't have to, I don't know, like you should be able to draw this if you want to be an artist, a background artist. And so, you know, so there's just lots of drawings in here, just different things, different object studies, different texture studies, you know, glass compared to, you know, rocks, and compared to plastic. For a background painter, that is super important, our ability to understand and paint texture, you know. And so then, okay, we get past that. Sketchbook, what's the background artist sketchbook look like? Now, this will be a little bit tricky because of the plastic, so let me take it out. Of course, this is all digital now, but when in your digital drawings, I'm just going to show you my actual sketchbook, pages from my actual sketchbook. So just being able to draw both, even though a background painter is not required to draw characters and things, but we still have to understand space or spatial relationship, putting people in an environment, because that is what we're going to be doing. So drawing, you know, so your sketchbook should be essentially environments with people interacting in these environments, and then of course focus on objects and things like that. And at this level, then I think it's fairly good for a sketchbook. And the main thing with when you're drawing environments in your sketchbook, of course, the same way with the actual studies of the environment, like we said, you know, just kind of light and shadow. So not just lines. That's kind of really important. So when we're drawing environments here, you really want to focus on shadow and light, because that's something that background artists look at. Like, does this person understand value? Because that's what we need to describe an object when you're painting, right? When you're painting with color, value is still very important, because value, light and shadow, is what determines how solid an object look, and does the object look real or not. And so we practice that. Are
there certain things, because when I go into the animation aspect, I'm going to talk about kind of some just Japanese anime specific kind of things.
Okay.
Are there Japanese anime specific things that people should look out for? Because the stuff you're saying is all obviously great in terms of an art class, right? Like, hey, these are general things to look out for, especially when focusing on the background, focus more on tones and things like that. But for the background artist who's like, I want my stuff to look more Japanese anime-esque, or I want to crack into that industry, what do you have to say to them?
And I wonder, so that's interesting, because, and I think that is the one difference between background and character, because I think with character design, there's things that will be very specific, character animations, they're going to be things that are very specific, that Japan does that America doesn't do. In America, I think the thing that Japan does that American background artists don't do is realism. Like Japanese background animation is very realistic, right? It's very like solid. Like I think Disney's backgrounds and things are more impressionistic, where Japanese backgrounds really are just like, you know, they paint their cities and things all the time. And so I think that you have to have a higher understanding, I think, of backgrounds, or just of environments. You know, like there's I wouldn't say there is a difference between use of color here, in which I will show you that next, with backgrounds. There are, of course, I mean, like, for example, when I painted the Naruto backgrounds, this is not realistic at all. But
this isn't even actually the normal Naruto show. This is the Rock Lee spin-off.
Yeah, this is the Naruto Rokuri spin-off. And so, you know, so then this one, you can kind of like, some of the rules you just throw out the window, right? But you can only break rules when you know the rules. And so, like, you know, like, of course the sky doesn't look real, and the mountains just like you know, Rokuri would use very flat colors. And I think a lot of Western backgrounds tend to be like this, all the new. So even I was watching the new Harlequin series. It looks really cool. I like it a lot. But you know, the backgrounds and things are very flat.
Yeah.
And so, which is different than what you normally see here. And so we'll just kind of go through these really quickly because I don't want to I don't want to ramble too much. I'm going to pass through. Okay, so of course we paint it on paper. I don't know which one I use. Okay, this is from Otomo's film.
Short piece.
The short piece. This is on the roof. And then this one is a mixture of both, realism mixed with a little bit impressionism. Of course, just understanding depth and where the character was kind of running through here. He runs past this, I don't know what this is. It's like some kind of metal thing. And he runs in between these fans on the roof. And with this scene, I actually got to choose the colors and things myself, which is pretty cool. But, of course, the background city is something that's not the focus, right? If I would have painted this super detailed, our eyes would go there. That wasn't the focus of this. So I kind of lightened this up and in Japanese they say shirotobashi. Shirotobashi is you use white to kind of tone down the image. So, the backgrounds, we use a lot of white, and then that way the colors kind of just fade out. And then use the darker, stronger, more contrast and more saturated colors in the foreground so that pops out. So just kind of color theory, I guess, right? Being able to decide, okay, how warm, the warmer temperature colors in the foreground, cooler temperature colors in the background. When I worked at Ogura Kobo, especially even for production IG, light and shadow and value is super important. So depending on where you're going to work in the Japanese industry, if you want to work at Ghibli, you have to have a really strong understanding of flowers, right? Like knowing the difference between the different types of plants and things, because that is why their nature looks so realistic. And then at Ogura Kobo, we use light and value to kind of differentiate our colors.
Did you have anything you wanted to mention about these books? And then
they were kind of jump over. So this was Momoe no Teigami. This is a movie I worked on at Production IG.
A Letter to Momo in English.
A Letter to Momo. And we talked a little bit last time just about being able to also paint, to focus on what it is that you're painting, because background painting isn't always, at least Japanese background painting is not always wide shots and things like that, right? If you're really high level, then you're going to paint. So here's some, like for example, photo references of the city, and then they would paint. Let's see if we can get through one so I can show you. All right. So let me see. I'm trying to see if I can find an image that's much bigger. Okay, here we go. So for example, here's a scene in Letter to Momo, A Letter to Momo, where you have the whole room. But you'll see that a lot of background painting is actually close-ups and things. So here's a floor, and I think I painted quite a few floors for this movie. And then here's just a windowsill, and here's just like a close-up of the roof. You're going to be doing that way more than you're going to be painting rooms and Japanese, or just backgrounds in general, because the focus is on the character.
Well, in Japanese anime, it is correct, I think, because one thing that it isn't either of our primary jobs, although I've done it a few times, like storyboarding.
Yeah.
For Japanese anime, it's more kind of like cinematic than I think most Western stuff, Mm-hmm. Whereas, so there are lots of just really close-up shots and unique angles looking at different things that don't really appear very much in Western animation, I think. So in the West, it might be more just room and then detail of the room, and the characters have constantly cut between that. Whereas anime, it could truly be any angle of any little background element in the room and things.
Yeah, exactly.
Things of that nature.
And then it's kind of in there. Of course, as we keep going through this vlog, to show you more and more. The vlog here isn't usually probably going to be like just art lessons, right? It's just talking about random stuff in the anime industry. But this time we thought we'd talk about some art detail. We always try to keep these definitely under 20 minutes. This week's we might go a little bit over. But so in terms of animation, I don't have my portfolio or art books of stuff I've worked on here. So this is not stuff I've worked on.
I guess the nature of animation makes that a little bit difficult because it's the motion. Showing even any printout of one single thing wouldn't give the same effect. For animation, I mean, there's so many different types of motion. I can only suggest that you follow what it is that you like and kind of what's in your heart almost, right? And let that be what guides you to what kind of work you want to do. So if you really like very squashy and squishy Betty Boop kind of characters, probably Japanese animation isn't where you generally want to work, right? That's not to say you're better or worse than anyone else, right? Because animation can look amazing no matter what the style. But decide what kind of style you really want to work with, and then follow that career path. As opposed, because I think it would be harder to be like, I really want to do this, but I don't really like drawing that. You know, you should definitely follow what it is that you like. So if you do like really detailed Japanese anime stuff, right? I love like a drawing that isn't quick, that clearly took 2 hours, but I love that 2 hour drawing, super detailed drawing, is moving all around. That's the kind of stuff I really liked. Then maybe anime is what you want to do. So last time I mentioned that a lot of animators in or like newbie, like webgen animators, one thing I've noticed, and we've even worked with a few before, is that while they are amazingly skilled, since a young age they got to work with, you know, computers where you could immediately have feedback of your motion, right? Which is unbelievable. For me, for years and years, I had to draw all on paper and then photograph it and then check it and then, oh no, let's try it on twos now. And if I wanted to change something from threes to twos, it would take an hour of reshooting it and be like, oh, look at that slight difference. Whereas now you just hit enter and get immediate feedback and can change it, immediate feedback again. And so with that, the benefit of that, everyone's really good. But one thing I noticed is almost no one utilizes keyframes as much as well as they should. In Japanese animation, I used to collect animation cells, right? So the cell era is even before me. I never worked on cells, right? But I used to collect cells, and in the corner of the cells, some numbers would have circles around them, and some numbers wouldn't. That would indicate which are keys and which are in-betweens. So the key animator, the Gengamon, in Japanese, Gengamon means key animator and layout artist, like the one person lays the whole thing out, and then does all the key animation. So in Japanese animation, unlike Western animation, you really want to utilize keys and in-betweens properly. When I used to work on Supergel in the West, I would be handed a sequence, and then what was a key, what wasn't a key, what was a breakdown. If I wanted to change the angle of an arm in mid-motion, I could do that because I just have the file in front of me, and I'm allowed to change whatever I want, right? But in Japanese animation, keys need to go directly into another. This is one key, this is another key, this is another key. Whenever the direction changes anywhere in the body, really, or anywhere on anything, whenever the direction changes, you need another key. So if the arm zigzags, this would be a key, this would be a key, this would be a key, nothing in between would be a key, because all the in-between animator needs to do is draw one drawing directly in the middle of this and this, right? And so it will just connect. And so anytime there's a section that needs to just connect, you don't need to draw those as key animator. You should focus on the keys and then leave the in-betweens for the in-between animator, right? A lot of recent animators I've seen, you know, they post the rough animations online and they look absolutely amazing, but every single frame is a key. It's just, they did every single frame. But that's kind of insanity and not realistically utilizing the process the way the process should be utilized. You should focus on good keys and think, is a direction changing or is it not changing, right? And if the direction changes just ever so slightly, maybe not enough that you need a keyframe, but some kind of indication, there is a nakawari sanko in Japanese, which is in between kind of reference drawing. Hey, when you in between this, dip the hand down a little bit here. It's not, that little hand dip isn't so important that I need to draw a whole new key, but I should include the nakawari sanko so that you know to do that little motion, as opposed to the complete normal, just complete in between, right? I love the animator and animation director Nobuteru Yuki. the original Battle Angel OVA, Record of Lodos War, X, Heat Guy J, Escaflowne. I absolutely love his stuff. You know, when you look at his books, his art books, a lot of the drawings, to be honest, and I found this out later, aren't actually keyframes. You think this is his keyframe animation, but realistically, most of these are animation director changes. Someone already laid out the sequence, and these are actually changes done on top of someone else's animation to just get the characters perfectly into character model and things like that. But if you go through some of his art books, he did lay out himself certain sequences for like the X music video. So if you look at this, the line isn't even actually as super crisp as it was in those corrections. That's not the point of doing the original layout for Japanese animation. The point is very roughly setting up the background, the perspective, and where the characters are. You see scribbles all through the characters here, right? And that's completely okay for key animation. Even something like this, do you see how unclean the lines are and scribbly? That's okay for layouts. It's not okay for animation direction, secondary key animation. In contrast, here's a page of animation direction changes, and do you see how crisp those lines are? Nothing like the page that I just showed you before. That's because it's a different step in the process. So understanding the full process of Japanese animation is super valuable, because if you just think, I like drawing anime, hey, I'm going to be a Gengamon today, is what you're doing actually that position? Yeah. Or is it a different position? Are you jumping ahead to animation direction, or are you leaving it scribbly, which is okay for the stage and production you are responsible for right now.
That way the director, because in Japan they do separate everything. The director has to check it, you know.
Even if you draw it super crisp with every single frame as a key, it's still going to go through the rest of the normal animation process, and it might take retakes, and then half of your stuff might get thrown out because you weren't supposed to have even done it in the first place. There was a process.
Those are things we hear sometimes when we send it back, and we're like, okay, cool, we have to check this now. We're gonna have our, and he's like, oh, but I drew 200 drawing. You mean I'll have to redraw all? We're like, well,
of course you'll have to redraw all 200 because your stage of the process was laying out the 10 or 20 keyframes really nicely, not doing all 200. So study the stages of animation production here and what every single job title kind of requires. Only do that much, but then make sure also that much is done very, very well. Because great in-betweens, well, that's great in general, but if you're the Gengamon, I didn't need that. You did good on a part that I didn't need, and then maybe you didn't do great on the part I did need. So study, and you can find those online, like positions and what each of those mean. So study the positions, and then...
There was something like numbers. What were those?
So the number... so like A79, A80. Those are keyframes. If this is a... So, for example, this is one thing that a Gengamon would have to know. When you do your first round of layouts, every keyframe that you draw, you number it, and then you put a circle around it. And you don't, at this stage of production, need to take into account in-betweens. You yourself will have to fill out the timesheet and indicate how many in-betweens are necessary. But between the two images I just showed you, there might be, even though the numbers were 79 and 80, there might be 5 in-betweens between there. That number will change later when the in-between animator truly writes and draws all the in-betweens. But for the keys, that means that there's 80 keys actually in that sequence. That's quite a lot, and I bet in the very end there'll be something like 200 to 300 drawings for the whole thing, right? But so yes, knowing what those numbers mean, when you need to circle them, et cetera, is very important. So some things for you to keep in mind and do some more research on your own about, I guess. This has already gone long, so let's call it a day. And if you have any more questions, always comment in the comment section, please. We'll read them. If something didn't make sense in this week's interview, we want to know what didn't you get, because then we can do a whole discussion on that.
All right, so remember, we always say, 下地が大事.
The foundation is important.
Yes.
We talked about that in episode 1. Go back and check it out if
Check
you
it
haven't.
out.
Bye, guys.
Peace.